Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and what's next. It's a show that asks questions and peels back the layers of our average everyday experience and goes beyond scratching the surface. We interview people doing incredible things who are making a difference around the globe. Join me as we listen in and get one step closer to understanding that big ideas shared create collaboration. Collaboration can inspire community, and communities create social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. So my next two guests are Tim McAuliffe and Mark Critch, and we're here today on Face to Face to talk about a wonderful and thoughtful and moving and delightful and charming, how's that, new show coming to CBC in January 2022 called Son of a Critch, and it's based on the award-winning and best-selling memoir from Mark Critch, who you probably know from CBC's This Hour Has 22 Minutes, and it's a very real and authentic coming-of-age story of Mark as he grows up in St. John's, Newfoundland. And it's if you love comedy, if you love real life, if you love drama and laugh out loud moments, then you're going to want to see this show. And it really is delightful. I've seen a couple of episodes already, and I'm in, and I'm looking forward to what's next from some of these characters. Son of a Critch. It's the creation of actor and producer and writer, Mark Critch, of course, and showrunner Tim McAuliffe, who you may or may not have heard of, but writer producer, NBC's The Office, Last Man on Earth, Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, This Hour Has 22 Minutes, and Tim has a very long history of writing and producing, and Mark and Tim have been working together for a long time, and we just had a delightful about 20 minutes here on Face to Face, and we really just once again just kind of peeled back some of those layers and just started to get below the surface. But we talked about kind of the secret of comedy. We talked about authenticity and transparency in comedy and how it can take on those real world moments. We talked about how Mark's first kiss may have been at a funeral, and why it's a good thing to socialize at wakes. You're going to want to listen in on this. We talked about Newfoundlanders having a wicked sense of humor and why that's the case. We talked about, again, that line between reality and fiction and imagination, and how comedy has a place to just kind of, move the needle a little bit on some of the most profound and difficult issues that we're facing today, in Canada and frankly around the globe. So Son of a Critch, it's fun, it's funny. Malcolm McDowell, Clockwork Orange. I mean, come on, he's starring in this show, and he stepped in, and you're gonna enjoy his performance as well. So stay tuned. But for now, listen in, and don't forget, if you're loving what we're doing here at Face to Face, please do sign up wherever you subscribe to podcasts for Face to Face, and leave us a review if you get a chance. We would really appreciate that. Socially mediate the heck out of us. Get us out there if you can. Sign up for our newsletter. There's only a few of those, maybe 4 a year. And but for now, stay tuned as we step into it with Mark Critch and Tim McAuliffe talking about their lovely and wonderful, fun new show, CBC new show, Son of a Critch. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We're joined by two very special guests here today. I'm thrilled to have Mark Critch and Tim McAuliffe here today to talk about, well, I hope a whole lot of things. But before we step into everything, let's thank Mark and Tim for joining us here today on Face to Face. I really appreciate you both taking the time out of your day to spend it here with us.
Oh, our great pleasure.
Taking the time, yeah.
So why exactly are we getting together actually online? What is this conversation really supposed to be about? Do either of you know?
We are, myself and Tim, we're old friends, and we've worked together on a million things over the years. We're special for the Muppets together, and we worked on 22 Minutes together. But currently what we're working on is an adaptation of a book I wrote about growing up in 80s Newfoundland and Labrador called Son of a Critch. And we made a TV show, which will be airing on CBC, all about, based on that book, about, going to Catholic school and being an old soul and making your way through the playground at the age of 11.
So it takes place in 1986, right, Mark? And it's mostly about you and your family and your life growing up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I grew up about 50 miles away from anything, on the outskirts of town next to a radio station because my dad worked at the radio station and he's a news guy. And then our house is kind of like that was sort of like the lighthouse keeper for the radio station in a way, in that in those days, landlines and whatnot, you had to have somebody who could be there 24 hours. So there was a house next to the radio station, and dad was there in case of, breaking news or a dead air or anything like that.
What
And
would
so we grew.
Mark? What would define breaking news in that area?
Well, it could be anything from a car crash to a big snowstorm
Right.
to a small. Yeah, dad was famous for making big news out of small town news. So, like for
Nice.
instance, one time there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken had been robbed, and they stole like $20 from the cash. But the guy said, "That's all that's in the cash. I also want a bucket of chicken." So they said, "Well, we don't have any on right now. I gotta make some fresh." And he's like, "Oh, wait." So he's got like a butter knife, and they made a bucket of chicken, and him and his buddy left, and they were eating the chicken and walking back to their house, their apartment, which wasn't that far away, and throwing the chicken over their shoulders. And then the police came and they followed the bones to the guy's house, and they arrested him there. And so dad had a report on that. So he said that the two suspects were discovered by members of the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary after detectives followed a trail of denuded chicken bones. It's like, so it was like, that was your average Mike Critch story. Yeah.
Tim, you've written for so many incredible shows. You've had wonderful career, and by all means, go ahead and boast about that. And I'll be doing that a little bit offline too, just so you know. But is it easy to write comedy with a guy like Mark? Does it just kind of flow, or?
I think when we first started on 22 Minutes, we both just sort of really connected comedically and just started writing. We used to go for dinner every Tuesday night, and we would write down all of our ideas just together on old cocktail napkins, and we'd splurge on a dinner on Tuesdays. That was our treat to ourselves while we wrote, and then we a couple of bottles of wine probably and that sort of thing. And then the next morning we would both go home with the cocktail napkins for the sketches we were going to write up and try to make heads or tails of it. But it always sort of seemed to work, and we've always worked together and loved that. And Mark's just Mark even married my wife and I. We've become so close that it's become something that we've just and plan to probably for the remainder of our lives work together on stuff, and just hopefully for this for a couple of years at least. But it's just something we've really connected on that sort of level. And
it's so cool, eh? Sorry about this, but as you get older, working with friends, I mean, does it get any better than that?
No, I mean, it's the ultimate. Yeah. And we got to spend 3 months together this summer in Newfoundland, and Mark is the king of Newfoundland. So it's funny.
Mark, I got to say, Mark, being the king of Newfoundland, I'm a little disappointed you have a shirt on today. I've a little shout out there.
Oh, right.
Is that fair enough?
Well, I only take my shirt off when there's prime ministers around.
So. That's honestly one of my favorite Canadian moments of all time. Yeah. And I think the forget his name right now, but the shot of the MP with the hand.
Oh, Seamus O'Regan, that was up there too. Yeah, he's just like, I can't believe this is happening. Yeah, I did that. Guy? Yeah, that was a famous picture of. I had my shirt off behind Justin Trudeau making fun of him because he had been showing up in shirtless pics everywhere. But that was done to purely just to embarrass my children. My two sons, Jacob and Will, were with me, and
I'm sure you succeeded in that.
Oh yeah, well they said don't do anything stupid when we meet the prime minister. Okay?
Nice.
I said like what? And so I did that. Yeah.
Hey, congratulations to you both on the show. I've seen 2 episodes. It's delightful. It's charming. It's funny. I can't wait to see what's next. Like I'm in. I found myself coming to the near the end of the second episode thinking, I like these people. And I mean, that's a wonderful place to be too. Mark, how close is this to real life? And did you really get your first kiss at a funeral parlor? It's an important question we need the answer to.
That is, every episode is, the spine of it is true, and I did not get my first kiss at a funeral parlor, but I did at the end of that episode. The girl from the funeral parlor, we have a little date, and I have to meet her in the park, and I'm very late, and it lasts like a millisecond, and nothing is said during the date. And this girl who I was my first date, my first girlfriend, kind of very briefly, we barely spoke at all. And this is all, that's all directly true. One thing, the weird thing about this is sometimes you have to, in the real life moments, peel it back a little bit,
Sure.
because there are some things that are just unbelievable. And one of those was on my way to that date, rushing to get to the park from where I lived. It took forever, and trying to get there, showing up about an hour late for the date. I actually got hit by a bus on my way to that date, because I was rushing from, the bus would stop. I had to transfer. And as I ran over to the other side of the street, a bus hit me and I went down, and I was like, just adrenaline. I didn't feel anything at first.
Wow.
And then I remember popping up, and the bus driver looked at me like, what the hell? I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. And I ran off into the bushes because I was so embarrassed, and like waited for the next bus. And you can't put that in the show because it seems too crazy. So the weird thing about writing a show about your life is sometimes you actually have to edit your life for being unbelievable.
Well, so I've never met anyone who's been hit by a bus. I do want to get that right out on the table out of the gate, but often I'll use it in conversation. We got to get that hit by a bus policy in there, just in case you get hit by, right? And now I know someone who's been hit by a bus. So
it was Barry. He just got me. He was just stopping at the
Sure.
stop. So he was slowing down, but I felt it the next day.
Tim, is it like getting a great golf shot? Is that what bringing a show like this together is? You got so many talented people. I just can't believe the cast, and I would imagine a lot has had to gel. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I actually play golf, so yeah, it is exactly like that. The reality is that when we found Benjamin, was just like, oh wow, we were nervous because when you pitch a show like this, you sort of live and die by this main character that's going to be in every single scene and that sort of thing. And so we did a search all through Canada and at the same time all through the UK, and just found this wonderful actor from Leeds, or I guess around there, Mark, right? And
Yorkshire. Yeah.
Yorkshire. Oh, sorry. And basically was just, oh yeah, we have a show. And then adding Malcolm to the mix was amazing. And then
Sure.
we have this wonderful director, Renica, who took the first 4 episodes and she quarantined for 2 weeks coming to Newfoundland. She spent all that time just talking to the actors and just was this wonderful, wonderful director who's worked on a million other things, but just worked so perfectly with what we were looking to do. And so it all came together really nicely. Yeah.
Mark, you've been doing a comedy a long time. And this may be a big question, but I love the young Mark's attitude towards death. And in the second season, can you tell me, when comedy really wants to take on an issue, it's not just a joke, right? You're peeling back layers here on some pretty incredible issues. You've got this, and what I love about the show, by the way, too, is it's not just a comedy. It seems to me.
No,
Like there's some real dramatic elements to this. I want to see what happens from a bullying perspective. There's some really neat things you guys are taking on. So a lot in that question, I think, Mark, and I'm not even sure if I formulated it properly, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on what comedy can do when it really steps in.
well, great thing about comedy is there's truth in comedy, and you can talk
Sure.
about uncomfortable things comedically, and you can also let some steam out of the kettle in a moment. Like, well, the
Nice.
great thing about comedy is you can get into interesting, uncomfortable things to talk about, and you can still talk about the uncomfortable thing and then play up the uncomfortable moments of your characters talking about it for comedy. Well, it's a great way to get the conversation happening, right? And a lot of truth can be said. And, I think that's something we wanted to do because we wanted to have real dramatic moments in there. We wanted to have let these scenes live without a joke for a long time. But the great thing is you build up that tension and then you have a little joke and boom, you let the pressure out and then everybody can relax. So it's a little bit like, sugar with your medicine in that way. And, in Newfoundland, certainly we've always been using humor to deal with tough elements. And that's where we get a kind of a dark sense of humor at times. But there's a lot of, with bad weather and small communities and death from the sea, and like people get a real dark sense of humor sometimes. So that's part of, you learn to kind of deal with everything in life with a little bit of a laugh, and it's not meant to be dismissive.
Right.
It's just kind of an acknowledgement. It's like, okay, this is happening.
Well,
Have a little joke.
there's an authenticity in there, isn't there?
Oh, very much so. And growing up with older folks, as I did, you get, like, I think there is a type of humor you get later in life, which is a bit darker because all your friends have died. You've been through it. You've seen what happens with. I remember, like, my dad. Like there's an acceptance of the way the world is, which lets you kind of be glib about some things, but not in a disrespectful way. I remember I was early 20s, and a friend of mom and dad's had taken quite ill and had gone into palliative care, and they were comforting the lady about her husband, and then mom was like, kind of, lazy. Well, he might turn around. He might get better. And then mom said, yes, girl, yes, he might get better. And dad, for the paper, goes, ha, behind the newspaper at the table here, ha, palliative care. I've seen a lot of Joes go in. I haven't seen one Joe come out. Flick. And then she bursts into tears. But he's like, oh, no. Like, there's almost a forgetfulness that not everybody is as old and calloused as you are in dealing with these things, But
I
that's
I love the punctuation with the paper.
Oh yeah, dad was always behind a newspaper flicking it, But yeah, so that's where you get like some of the stuff about, young Mark being so comfortable around death, as I was with wakes. I mean, we say in the show, like the mom and dad didn't go out to dinners, they didn't go to movies, didn't do anything. That, a wake was a social thing that,
Right.
happened. And then people weren't upset at wakes. They're like, oh, how are you? Yeah, lovely corpse, great. And it was just an acceptance of that time. They were in a different time of life than I was, or other parents were. So I kind of catapulted to being that old soul.
Takes the sting out of it to some degree, it seems to me.
Oh my God. Yeah. Even now, I love a wake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing like a good wake. Tim, what about the line between fiction and reality? Do you find, as a writer over the years, with all the work that you've done, that you draw more from, I was going to say you draw more from your, imagination than you do from reality, but how do you make the distinction between those two, But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, having heard these stories from Mark and read the books and that sort of thing, and obviously just knowing Mark, it feels like we can naturally sort of extend what happened to something that's fiction and that sort of thing. So it's been fun. It's interesting because every time, it is true. Like Mark also told we have another episode where they find or see someone burying a dead body in the woods, and it turns out, without spoiling too much, but it's a moose and not a person. And the real story is that Mark did actually see them burying a real dead body in the woods, and so we had to pull it back just because the reality was actually much more unbelievable than the fiction, which is really kind of incredible. So it's been going both ways in sort of extending sort of the actual reality and then reducing it when needed.
Mark, do you find the real world funnier than the imaginary one?
Well, it's interesting. It's almost like playing with toy soldiers in a way, in that what happened, and then you can give people maybe a happier ending than actually happened. Which is interesting. My best friend in the show is a guy, Richie Perez, who is Filipino Canadian. He was bullied really hard by people. Because he was the only person of color in our school, and he just saw I just showed him the pilot for the first time, the first episode, and we're talking about it, and I thought about that a lot with Richie. I wanted to tell part of his story with his permission, and it's interesting having him see it, and it's kind of, you want him to go through a lot of that bullying in the show to show what it was like, but then as you're writing it, you're kind of like, you want to peel it back because you don't want to do it to him. You kind of feel it. And the same thing, and there's other things too. Like my grandfather is played by Malcolm McDowell in the show. My real grandfather died when my father was 5, and he would be 100 years old in January. My dad, right? So I never got to know my grandfather. My father never really got to know his father that well. I know a lot about him as a person, but there are other older figures like Dad's older relatives who are that character of Pop, and my grandmother, and different things that I made him of. So part of that was my little gift to myself, was to get to know my grandfather in the show. Really, the characters were based on his uncle, his dad's cousin, who was like a grandfather to me, older cousin Franklin on Belle Island. But it was like, now you lived. And that was my one real indulgence, was like, no, he lived. And I got to know him.
Malcolm McDowell's so great, Mark. What great. I mean, he reminds me a little bit, you know what? A little bit of the dude in The Big Lebowski. Is that fair? Yeah.
That's fair. Totally.
I can't smoke lying down anymore. It's hilarious. That's like the funny. So funny. I love how you kind of take down bullying. What's the line? Help me out here. A stunning indictment of the Catholic School Board geography program.
Yeah, because nobody knew what the Philippines was, of course. So Richie would be made fun of as they call them the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Japanese, everything but. He's constantly trying to go like, no, there's this place, the Philippines. And then the whole Marcos thing happened, which was great because at least people knew, that I see, it is a real place, but it wasn't until then. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's so good. Hey, listen, we got to wrap it up in a couple of minutes. I wish you guys so well with the show. You must have pretty big plans. Are you stepping into the U.S. and then beyond? Is that kind of what's next?
Hopefully, yeah. We're trying to figure that out. I think there's a company that's taking it out, and I think it's one of those ones that even though it's geographically very specific, I think it has a sort of themes that are very relatable and that sort of thing. So,
yeah, that's one. And the first real realization of that, I think, is both Benjamin Evan Ainsworth and Malcolm McDowell, neither Canadian, neither knew what Newfoundland was or anything. They both really connected to the characters. And so that tells me that we have something that can travel. And Lionsgate is our distributor, and they really believe in it. So we'll see what happens.
Well, come from away, put you guys on the map, and let's hope Son of a Critch does the same thing. And the next time somebody's about to use the expression and says Son of a Critch instead of, the other one,
then we'll know.
We'll know. Yeah. This is success. What a pleasure having you both on the show today. Thanks for joining me, Mark Critch and Tim McAuliffe, here to talk about a wonderful, touching, and lovely new program coming out soon, not in a theater, but soon to be seen on CBC, Son of a Critch. Thanks to you both for joining me today.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate it.
So there you have it. I hope you had as much fun as I did having a conversation with Mark Critch and Tim McAuliffe talking about Son of a Critch, the new show coming to CBC, also based on the best-selling memoir from Mark Critch called, well, you guessed it, Son of a Critch. And we had a great time. We stepped into it, I think, in a really interesting way. And we were able to actually get into a couple of issues, too, which is always fun. And I think comedy has that ability. And, one of the big takeaways for me is to figure out how is it that we can all start to foster a wicked sense of humor. So please do subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to Face. Please also leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you do listen. Sign up for us on YouTube. Subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. And also step into this wonderful, delightful, real and authentic, funny new show, Son of a Critch, coming soon to CBC and hopefully to wherever you watch your favorite television programs. And we'll see you again very soon here on Face to Face.